Mauro Prosperi. In 1994, Italian police officer and pentathlete Mauro Prosperi set out to run the Marathon des Sables, a brutal 6-day, 250-kilometer race across the Sahara Desert. He was driven by adventure, discipline, and a desire to test his limits. But the Sahara had its own plans. On the fourth day, a violent sandstorm struck, blinding runners and scattering them in every direction. Prosperi lost the course and soon realized he was utterly alone. He wandered for hours, then days, with barely any water. The sun scorched him by day and froze him at night. He rationed what he had and even drinking his own urine to survive. Desperate for shelter, he stumbled upon an abandoned Muslim shrine in the middle of nowhere. There he found bats and drank their blood to stay alive. Believing rescue was impossible, Prosperi wrote a farewell note to his wife on the shrine's wall, slit his wrists, and then, miraculously,
"Bitch, I'm back out my coma,"
woke up alive. His blood had clotted too quickly in the heat. Weak, delirious, but determined. After 9 days lost in the desert, 185 miles off course, he was found by a nomadic family in Algeria. They gave him oranges, tea, and water, and saved his life. Prosperi had lost 40 pounds and much of his body's moisture, but not his spirit. Months later, he returned to running, and even went back to finish the Marathon des Sables years later. Julianne Koepcke. On Christmas Eve 1971, 17-year-old Julianne Koepcke boarded Lanza Flight 508 with her mother, flying over the vast Peruvian rainforest. The sky was bright until the plane entered a violent thunderstorm. Lightning struck. The fuselage ripped apart. Julianne was still strapped to her seat when she was sucked out of the plane, falling 10,000 feet, nearly 2 miles, into the jungle below. Somehow, she survived the fall. Her collarbone was broken, one eye was swollen shut, and her body was covered in deep cuts. But she was alive, alone, in one of the most unforgiving places on Earth. Julianne's parents were both biologists, and she had grown up in the jungle. That knowledge, how to recognize safe water, how to follow rivers to civilization, would save her life. For 11 days, she wandered through the rainforest, surviving on rainwater and candy she'd found from the wreckage. She waded through knee-deep water to avoid predators, endured constant insect bites, and fought off infection. She even passed pieces of the plane and bodies of fellow passengers, realizing the scope of what had happened. Finally, exhausted and near collapse, she found a small boat on the riverbank. Nearby were lumbermen who treated her wounds and took her to safety. Julianne Koepcke was the sole survivor of the 92 people aboard Flight 508. Her story became a symbol of calm intelligence and incredible resilience under impossible odds. Years later, she returned to the jungle, not in fear but in respect, and became a biologist, just like her parents. José Salvador Alvarenga. In November 2012, José Salvador Alvarenga, a Salvadoran fisherman living in Mexico, set out on what was supposed to be a 2-day fishing trip off the coast of Chiapas. His companion was a young man named Ezequiel Cordoba. They packed a small boat with bait, fishing gear, and ice, nothing more. But soon after they left shore, a massive storm rolled in. Towering waves and relentless wind smashed their boat. The motor died, their radio failed. The two men were pushed far out into the open Pacific Ocean, completely adrift. At first, they survived on the fish they caught with their bare hands and on rainwater. When rain didn't come, they drank turtle blood. They fashioned tools from scraps, learned to catch birds, and collected whatever floated by. But after weeks at sea, Ezequiel fell sick from eating raw meat and salt water. He begged for food, then refused to eat, and after about a month, he died. Alvarenga was devastated, but he refused to give up. For 438 days, over 14 months, he drifted alone across nearly 7,000 miles of ocean. He spoke to the sky, to God, even to the sea creatures around him, anything to stay sane. Then, one morning in January 2014, he saw green. He had washed ashore on a remote Marshall Islands atoll, thin, sunburned, and weak, but alive. Locals found him staggering along the beach. Doctors were stunned. He had survived longer at sea than almost anyone in history. José Salvador Alvarenga's story became one of the greatest real-life tales of endurance ever told. A man who lost everything at sea, yet somehow through faith and sheer instinct, made it home again. Alexander Selkirk. In 1704, Scottish sailor Alexander Selkirk found himself arguing with his captain on the privateering ship Cinque Ports. Selkirk believed the vessel was rotting and unsafe. The captain refused to turn back. Selkirk made a bold demand: leave him on the nearest island rather than sail on a ship he believed would sink. So the crew dropped him on Mas a Tierra, a remote island in the South Pacific, with only a knife, a musket, a pot, bedding, some tools, and a Bible. He watched the ship sail away. It later sank, just as he feared. Selkirk was now completely alone. The first months were brutal. He battled hunger, loneliness, and the cries of sea lions that roared across the beaches. But he adapted. He built 2 huts from pepper trees, tamed wild wild goats for meat and milk, crafted clothing from their skins, and learned to move silently through the hills to avoid Spanish ships that occasionally passed by. If they found him, he would be imprisoned. To keep his mind steady, he read the Bible aloud and sang to himself. He hunted goats so quickly and skillfully that he could chase them down barefoot. When rats overran his huts at night, he raised wild cats to protect him. Selkirk survived this way for 4 years and 4 months. Then, in 1709, the British privateer ship Duke anchored offshore. Selkirk, now deeply tanned, bearded, and dressed in goatskins, approached the sailors and stunned them with his story. He joined the crew and eventually returned to Britain, celebrated as a man who had endured isolation with ingenuity and grit. His survival tale spread across Europe and later inspired Daniel Defoe when he wrote Robinson Crusoe, one of the most famous adventure novels of all time. Alexander Selkirk had gone from castaway to legend. Aron Ralston. In April 2003, Aron Ralston, a mechanical engineer turned wilderness adventurer, set off alone to explore Blue John Canyon in Utah. He was experienced, confident, and used to navigating narrow slot canyons with nothing but his pack, his rope, and his determination. But as he descended into one of the tight sandstone passages, a suspended boulder shifted. It crashed down, pinning his right arm against the canyon wall. He tried everything he knew. He pulled, twisted, used physics, used strength. Nothing worked. He was trapped. Ralston had not told anyone where he was going. Rescue was not coming. For 5 days, he rationed his tiny supply of water and the last bites of food in his pack. He carved his name and the date into the rock. He recorded goodbye messages to his family on his camera. The cold nights and the heat of the days pressed down on him. Dehydration warped his mind. Still, he refused to quit. On the 6th day, delirious and desperate, he realized the only way out was to free himself by amputating his arm. Using the dull blade of a cheap multi-tool, he began the unthinkable. It took time, courage, and unimaginable pain. When he finally broke free, he rigged a one-handed rappel down a sheer cliff, then hiked 6 miles through the desert until a family of hikers found him and alerted rescuers. Aron Ralston survived because he refused to surrender. His story spread around the world, showing what a human being can do when life hangs in the balance. Later, he returned to climbing, gave speeches about resilience, and saw his ordeal adapted into the film 127 Hours. Ralston's escape from Blue John Canyon remains one of the most extraordinary modern survival stories, a testament to grit, ingenuity, and the will to live. Ernest Shackleton and crew. In 1914, Ernest Shackleton set out to cross Antarctica with a crew of 27 men aboard the ship Endurance. Before they reached land, the pack ice closed in and crushed the ship, leaving the crew stranded on the frozen sea with no hope of outside rescue. Shackleton kept his men organized and calm. They camped on drifting ice, hunted for food, and waited for a chance to escape. When the floes broke apart, they launched 3 small lifeboats and fought through freezing waves until they reached the remote coast of Elephant Island. Knowing no one would find them there, Shackleton chose 5 men and sailed the small boat James Caird across more than 800 miles of storm-filled ocean to South Georgia. After landing on the wrong side of the island, he crossed its mountains on foot and reached a whaling station. He then returned for his crew. After several attempts blocked by ice, he finally broke through and rescued every man. Shackleton never crossed Antarctica, but his leadership turned disaster into one of the greatest survival stories in history. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and feel free to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching.